Dan, thank you. That was terrific. It was uplifting. It gives positivity. It gives direction. And, you know, if anybody thought it, we're not a party of protest. We're a party that is about putting things right. We are well led. We've got a great slate of candidates, a growing membership. I think we can do well in Wales, don't you? Yes. OK. We now have some questions from the press. Where are the press sitting? I can't. Over there. Right, fantastic. Starting off, somebody from BBC Wales, either Gareth Lewis or Daniel Davis.
Morning, both.
Give them a chance.
Yeah, just a question for each of you, if I could. Mr Thomas, first of all, 5 years ago, Reform pledged to halve the number of Welsh local councils. We attempted to be that radical in this manifesto, and you obviously weren't, so why? And for Mr Farage, lots of the manifesto actually looks very similar to the Conservative manifesto published earlier this week. Were you tempted to be more radical?
I'll answer that first. The Conservative Party... Oh, I remember them. They used to be a big national party, didn't they? Actually, it's very, very funny. It was very, very funny that we pre-announced this event, and obviously seeing it, the Conservatives panicked and decided at a rush to get theirs in first. Forget about the Conservatives. They will be all but obliterated in Wales on May the 7th. And I would say this. In over a quarter of a century of devolution for Wales and Scotland, what you've seen again and again and again is devolution being used by the Labour Party, the SNP, whoever it may be, in conjunction, of course, with Plaid here. You see devolution used as a means of government getting bigger and making things more expensive, and in the case of Scotland, using those freedoms to put taxes up. If using devolution to cut income tax isn't a radical departure from the last 25 years, I don't know what is.
Councillors. And on the question of reducing the number of councils, just because it's not in the manifesto, it doesn't mean that we won't necessarily do it. But we need to pick our battles in Wales. So we look at the Conservative manifesto, and if you look at the other parties who've been launching their campaigns recently, they're promising too much and they won't deliver it. So we will be sensible and we will be proportionate in the kind of change that we achieve. Our focus is obviously NHS waiting lists, education, building the M4 relief road, helping farmers. The last thing we want to do is to go to war with 22 councils, although we will encourage efficiency savings. So you've got 22 councils, 22 planning authorities, 22 HR departments. I go on and on and on. These councils should be sharing services behind the scenes. And they've got, in my opinion, they've got two ways of doing that. They either grow up and come together and do it together via the public sector, or they can outsource it. They're the two options. I would prefer that they do it together and have in-house shared services. So we will be speaking to councils about how to make efficiencies. And the reason why we've capped council tax is because councils have had no incentive to be efficient, because it's in their DNA, especially if they're run by Plaid Cymru and Labour, it is in their DNA just to rack up rates and put the cost onto taxpayers, rather than making those hard decisions that I've had to make as a council leader in order to cut council tax and in order to save tens of millions from the back office. So halving the number of councils isn't a priority, but efficiency in the Welsh public sector is.
Good answer. Good answer. Thank you. Next up, we have Katie Fenton from ITV Wales.
Nigel Farage, you spent much of your speech this morning talking about events in Westminster, attacking Keir Starmer. Dan, you talked about getting Nigel into number 10. This is a Welsh election, it's about Welsh people. Or is this just about getting you to number 10?
It's a Welsh election, but I'm afraid whether you like it or not, it doubles up as a referendum on Keir Starmer's premiership.
And the people of Wales want Nigel in number 10. Okay. I've been campaigning with Nigel in Wales, and he's very popular, and certainly more popular than Keir Starmer, which is not hard. Which is not hard, to be fair.
Not a very high bar, is it?
But you are right. This is, of course, the election to the Welsh Parliament, and that's what we're focusing on. But we will need a reform government in Wales. Will need to work with a UK government, and it'll be best if we work with a UK reform government. It'll be simple as that. We'll be able to work with each other on funding for the M4 Relief Road. We'll be able to work with each other on building nuclear energy capacity and all sorts of other infrastructure projects, because we share the same values of ambition for this country, for Wales and for the UK.
Okay, thank you. Jacob Morris, S4C.
Yes, a question to the both of you. You've said previously, Mr Farage, that you don't believe in the target for 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. Does that still stand? And you mentioned in the manifesto that you want to end the Quango carousel. Does that mean that the future of the Welsh Language Commissioner, what does that mean for the future of the Welsh Language Commissioner?
From what I can understand, the Welsh language is thriving in Wales. It's being taught in schools. It seems the under 40s speak a lot more Welsh than many of the over 40s in certain parts. I would say let Welsh culture, let the Welsh language thrive. I don't see that it needs targets or quangos. If it's happening because people want it to happen, and I think that's a very good thing. I've no problem with it.
Look, there's plenty of examples of arbitrary targets where they don't work, and in a decade or two time they get reversed. Look at the 50% target with regards to university admissions. It was completely wrong, ill thought out, and other things fell aside because of it. And if you have a target in the public sector, it becomes a cottage industry of people working to hit that target. Absolutely, we support the Welsh language, but we don't think the target is necessary. It's organically, on its own, doing very well.
Yeah. It's happening anyway, isn't it? Okay, thank you. Andy Davis from Channel 4.
Dan Thomas, you're proposing cutting 10%, I think, of the civil service. By my calculations, I think that's about 500 job losses. Is that correct? And if so, are you proposing any further job losses across public services in Wales? And Nigel Farage, you've said that you will scrap net zero targets in Wales. How do you square that with the long-term projection that climate-related damage could cause significant harm to UK GDP by the early 2070s?
You know, if you actually look at this and take a long view, in the 1970s, global temperatures were cooling. There were concerns about a future ice age. Since the late 1980s, the global temperature is rising. You're right, it is rising. It's rising roughly 1/4 degree every decade. That's a pretty accurate scientific measure of what has been happening over the last 35 to 40 years. This is not unusual. You know, when the Vikings went to Greenland, it was green. That's why it's called that. You know, we then had cold periods where elephants walked across the Thames at Blackfriars. The climate is always changing. The debate is it man-made CO2 that is changing the environment? The other phenomenon, by the way, since the 1980s, is global greening. Because there's more carbon dioxide, there's more green stuff on the planet. So it isn't necessarily all catastrophic. It all depends what part of the world you live in. All I would say on the science is I don't know. But let me tell you what I do know. What I do know is that deindustrialising South Wales, closing down primary steel production in Port Talbot, seeing that manufacture exported to India, and then the products made under lower overall environmental standards, and then the steel shipped halfway around the world back to Wales isn't actually reducing carbon dioxide emissions. And you know, I am an environmentalist. I've always been an environmentalist. I'm genuinely worried about the state of rivers, the seas, and we'll talk more about that as this campaign goes on. A lot more about that. I'm concerned about plastics. I'm concerned about many things. But if we obsess on carbon dioxide, we forget many of the other things that are going wrong within our environment. We are 0.8% of the world's CO2 production, and for the price of being virtuous, we're deindustrialising the nations of the United Kingdom at massive economic and strategic cost to this country. So that's it.
And on the headcount of the civil service, I think 10%. You're quite. We put it around about 580 posts, and we'll do all we can to redeploy to help into other jobs. But ultimately, we need to make efficiencies in our civil service in Wales. It's become bloated, it's become inefficient, and we need to divert that money into frontline services.
Yeah, and of course, modern technology means that lower headcounts in the public sector actually become far easier without any loss of efficiency. Eleanor Story, Press Association.
Hi, my question's for Mr. Farage. Following the arrest yesterday, do you think there should be an inquiry into foreign interference in politics, and specifically in Welsh politics?
Yes, I do. Now, the government have announced an inquiry into the funding and interference in British elections and politics, which is timed to come out just before the May the 7th elections. All because they thought that with one bad apple called Nathan Gill, they could use all the resources of Whitehall to produce a damning report about us just ahead of the May the 7th elections. So I would say to the government, you're absolutely on the right track. And that I think efforts to discover foreign interference at all levels of British politics are vital, and in particular, Wales, because this is the only part of the United Kingdom with a parliament without a proper register of lobbyists. So if you're a bad actor from anywhere in the world that wants to get in, you'll find it much harder at Holyrood, much harder at Westminster, but in Wales, they've left the door unlocked, and that's something else we must deal with. I welcome this report in full before May the 7th, absolutely.
And can I add, it is on our manifesto to create such a register in Wales. That will be happening. And we'll also be very interested to know what's been happening in those Welsh Government offices in China. And that should be included in any report.
Very good. Rhys Owen from Golwg.
Barada, good morning. Nigel, public trust in politics is at an all-time low, and I mean, you have obviously raised the concerns regarding foreign interference today. Obviously, we saw, like you mentioned, with Welsh Labour and the connections that the three that got arrested to Welsh Labour with potentially or allegedly spying on behalf of China. With reform, with obviously you mentioned Nathan Gill. What steps are you taking to make sure that many of these first-time candidates, which I'm sure there will be many who are standing for the Senedd, are correctly vetted, to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Because if it does, it just reduces that trust even further, doesn't it? And with that,
Yeah.
sorry, go on.
I don't disagree with that. at all. And that question is a very fair question to ask any party that's putting up candidates for May the 7th. We are being as careful as we possibly can be, through vetting, credit checks, criminal record checks. In fact, our candidates that will be standing for us in these elections, all 96, will have been through a very, very rigorous process. Of course. Of course. I know, and actually, some of them are still bearing the scars of the cross-interrogation they've been through. They've been through media tests, by the way, quite unlike anything any other candidate's ever been put through before. Wherever there are large groups of human beings, you'll get one or two that are not as they ought to be. That applies in every walk of life. Even within families, there's the odd black sheep here or there, you know, and we all know that. Labour's problem is they've tried to say that we are holier than thou, that we are above all of this, and it's the awful corrupt Tories, and now it's reform with a bad apple, when actually, when it comes to China, and even if you look at some of the legal funding of MPs' offices from Chinese sources, you begin to ask yourself a very, very big question. And then you look at Jonathan Powell. Now, I might get sued here, but who cares? Then you look at Jonathan Powell, senior figure in the Blair government, national security advisor to Keir Starmer, who shortly before he took the job had a lobbying company engaged with Mauritius and with China, and then was the man selling the Chagos deal to the Americans on the basis that it should happen. I accept there's corruption everywhere you go in life, but for the Labour Party to pretend that they're exempt from this, it may well turn out they're the worst of a lot.
And can I, as a fellow candidate who's gone through the same process, I think it's been the most thorough vetting process of any political party. And I think that's right, number one, for integrity, for those who stand for election. But also, as reform, we will get more scrutiny than others.
Yeah, we will.
Inevitably we will. But our candidates have been through some quite vigorous employment checks, 20 years employment history checks, DBS checks, amongst others. So I think we are the most vetted bunch of candidates of any political party, and I'm really proud to be standing shoulder to shoulder with them in the forthcoming weeks for the election.
Conor Gagasi from Wales Online.
Hello both. You're pledging to upgrade hospitals. The biggest hospital in the country, the University Hospital of Wales, is in a completely dilapidated state. Reports have shown it's been unfit for purpose for years and is massively compromising patient safety. Labour has promised to build a replacement for that hospital. Will Reform commit to doing the same, and if so, how will you pay for it?
So we will carry out an audit of the entire NHS estate, and we will start fresh. And if we need to replace it, we will. But if we need to upgrade, we'll upgrade. But we will do our own audit first. There are certain things we can do with the public sector estate that will bring in extra money to refurbish, certain units. We want to focus on mobile screening as well as part of our 10-year cancer survival strategy. But we're not just going to just take Labour's plans and carry on with them. We will review them because a lot of them have fallen short in the past. So we will do our own thing. But absolutely, we will invest in our health infrastructure.
Bronwyn Weatherby from LBC.
Mr. Farage, LBC has learned the Home Office is piloting a scheme where families whose asylum claims have failed will be paid up to £40,000 to leave Britain rather than dragging their cases through the courts. The Home Secretary says this will save taxpayers £20 million on hotel costs. What's your reaction to this? Does it potentially increase the pull factor to the UK? And Mr. Thomas, your manifesto includes prioritising Welsh people for social housing. How exactly would you define Welsh for eligibility purposes, and how would you implement that within the equality laws without discrimination challenges?
If you come to Britain illegally, and then are deported and given cash to go home, then logically the next day you come back again, don't you, and repeat the whole thing over. There are many things on the big top line that Shabama Mahmood says that I absolutely agree with. For example, restricting student visas from countries where people just overstay. And therefore student visas become a form of illegal immigration. Trouble is, the 4 countries she's chosen to put the ban on only constitute 3% of those who get student visas. The real problem, we're being frank about it, the real problem is Pakistan. 9%, let's call it 10% of everyone that gets a visa, holiday visa, student visa, work visa, whatever it is from Pakistan, 10% illegally overstay. If you want to make a difference, you've got to take on countries like that, not countries like Sudan, where the numbers coming are absolutely tiny. And look, you know, at least her rhetoric is good. Much of it's not deliverable because we're stuck inside the ECHR. But it's also not deliverable because we've got a Labour Party that is going towards the left and being dragged there by Zach Polanski and the heroin mob, you know. I mean, I suppose whatever floats your boat, I don't know, but it's not quite for me, I've got to tell you, Dan. But the Greens are dragging Labour leftward, and sectarian politics is dragging Labour leftward. You've now got 50 Labour MPs who will lose their seats if the Pakistani, Kashmiri, Bangladesh community in their constituencies block vote Green, and therefore anything worthwhile that Shabama Mahmood tries to do will simply get vetoed by the Parliamentary Labour Party, and the problems within Britain from illegal immigration and excessive legal immigration will, I think, continue to get worse. I wish that wasn't the case, but I believe it to be the truth.
On Welsh homes for Welsh people, so we will prioritise those who've lived in Wales for 10 years. Social housing, there is a shortage and we have to ration it, so we have to have some residency requirements. So we think the 10-year rule is enough, and we'll also prioritise veterans who've served this country as well. And one thing we won't do is discriminate against people who may or may not speak Welsh. There was a town council, I think up in Gwynedd or somewhere, that proposed that social housing would only be allocated to Welsh speakers, and we think that is divisive, and we will not be doing that. So I can assure you, we will have a very fair housing policy that will put Welsh people and veterans first.
Very good. Okay, let's go to Philip Case from Farmers Weekly.
Hello. A question from Mr. Farage. Our farmers feel badly let down by many politicians. Why should they trust you? And also a question from Mr. Thomas. Bovine TB continues to cause huge devastation across our rural and farming communities. What would a reform government do from day one to really tackle this scourge?
Philip, I completely understand the premise of the question. Why should farmers, or frankly for that reason, any other group of people in the country believe what they're told by politicians? Farming has been through a tough time because we'd had basically half a century of being in the Common Agricultural Policy and the Common Fisheries Policy. And nobody in Whitehall was ready for the Brexit vote. And we've struggled to readjust. And I think the same goes actually in many ways for devolved powers in these areas as well. All I will tell you is this. I actually believe that the Labour Party is on an all-out mission to scapegoat the countryside, farmers, country pursuits in the most unnecessary, in the most appalling way. They propose taxes that weren't clearly explained in the manifesto. They even go after things like trail hunting. I mean, frankly, you might as well ban dog walking. I mean, the whole thing's unbelievable. I am a country boy by upbringing. I understand these things. And if you look at our list of candidates, you will find people still actively engaged in farming in Wales and from families that have been farmers in Wales. And I tell you something, you are more than welcome to meet any of them, interview any of them, understand how we want to simplify. I mean, some of the paperwork with the sustainability scheme, I was showed it by some North Welsh farmers. I simply couldn't believe. It was classic. I'm in an office in Cardiff, think. So look, we will be on the side of rural communities, and no other party leader has stood up for country issues in the way that I've done for a quarter of a century, all right?
And you're quite right, the politicians have let down the farming community. Reform will change that. One of my closest friends who's in the audience today, Ian, he's a farmer. Give us a wave, Ian. I hear about it when we go in the pub. I hear about it all the time. I understand the problems. And you say, what will we do on day one? What we can't do is have politicians micromanaging these things. So on day one, bring the farmers in, bring the farmers' unions down to the Senate, and we will talk about a solution. A practical solution that works on the ground, because we know how devastating the problem is. So I think that's the main thing, is that we will talk and we will work with you, and we won't work against you, and we won't be setting you off to do other things that have nothing to do with protecting the farm and producing food. Yeah. So I think that's the main thing. Let's work together, and let's restore that relationship between government and rural Wales.
Yeah. And in a very uncertain world, where much of the debate in the last 2 days is about shipping routes, yeah, I mean, in this case it's oil and gas, but it's still the same principle. I do actually think that the central government mad scheme to cover vast areas of the United Kingdom in solar panels, as opposed to food production, is completely the wrong priority. Yeah, okay. Four more. Right, cracking on. Jacob Reig from Bloomberg.
Hello both. Is this on?
Yeah, you're there.
Do you think you can deliver on your NHS promises with the current devolved powers and under the current model for the NHS? And what would you say to people who want reform to really look bigger at, for example, a French-style insurance healthcare system?
Well, I mean, that would be a national decision ahead of a general election. All I will say on the national side of it is there are 1 or 2 health trusts in England where they've managed, without huge increases in budgets, to massively increase delivery. And our chairman, David Bull, is, of course, a former GP. And we're looking at best practice. We're looking at how is it some of these trusts with the same money are getting massively higher percentage, output. So that's on the national level, and all that, and as I've said before, on the big UK picture of health, I'm prepared to consider any alternative to the failure we've got now. Yeah. And the failure is we've doubled expenditure, and there are no more beds in the NHS over the course of the last 10 years. It's not working. As for devolved powers, I'll let Dan speak to that.
So, there are too many health boards, in my opinion, in Wales, and it's fragmented, and there's duplication of management costs and back office as well. So there is a saving to be made there. One example is if you look at Manchester and the population there, and there's lots of similarities with Wales, but there is only one health board that covers that area, and yet we've got so many here. So I think that is an issue to look at. And actually, Nigel's example of some other health boards across the UK, where they're improving outcomes and reducing the budget. They're actually saving money by becoming more efficient. So I think what I think the money is there, £14 billion, is enough to spend on our health service, but it's not being spent properly. And as I said in my speech, we need to hold these chief executives and chief finance officers of health boards to account. And the health boards themselves need to work harder in that regard. And certainly there'll be more ministerial intervention if necessary to get health boards and to get hospitals performing. So I think there's a lot to be done there, and it needs to be done because 1 in 4 people in Wales are stuck on an NHS waiting list. I think something like 20% of them have been waiting over 12 months. And you compare that to just a few percent in England, and yet we get more money per head to spend on health. So we really do need to turn it around in Wales, and with me and my Reform colleagues, we will have somebody who will have a very laser-sharp focus on this and be holding those executives to account. And if they don't get the results, they'll have to go. That's what happens in the private sector.
Sure is.
You should not be receiving a 6-figure sum from the taxpayer and not delivering and tolerating failure in your organisation. That shouldn't happen. And it's just the Welsh public sector as a whole. In my council, Caerphilly Council, where council tax is going up 6% this year, there's been a whole section of senior officers having 6-figure payouts and non-disclosure agreements being signed, or behind closed doors. You know, this kind of thing happens in the Welsh public sector, and it needs to stop. And if we need to pass legislation to retrospectively change contracts, we will do it. We will take the action.
Pretty good. Elizabeth Piper from Reuters.
Hiya, I'll be quick. If you were betting men, and I'm not saying that you are.
Oh, I am. Don't worry about that.
If you happen to be betting men.
Cheltenham next week. Yeah, go on.
Would you put money on a Reform victory in Wales, and how much? Or, as some in your party say, is the better result to win the popular vote, come second, and then you don't need to govern a very difficult situation?
Oh, what a cynical mind. Cynical.
That is not the best result for Wales. That is not the best result for Wales. Wales needs reform to win and to be in government. Otherwise, it will not get the real change that it deserves.
Yeah, very good.
This is not a game. This is not a bet. This is serious. Wales is in a mess and it needs to be fixed. So we are campaigning to win and to sort out Wales.
Very good. Very good. No, I agree with that. I agree with that. Although, Elizabeth, if you had any thoughts on the Gold Cup next Friday at Cheltenham, I'd be very, very keen to know. Right, 2 more. Reeve Nesbitt-Marr from the Herald Wales and Pembrokeshire Herald.
Mr Thomas, Wales cannot actually control immigration because it's decided by Westminster. So what concrete policy would Reform introduce in Wales to end the nation of sanctuary approach?
You're quite right. We don't control immigration. The UK government and Border Force is meant to be doing that, and they're not. We understand that, but things like the nation of sanctuary, it is appalling. Do you remember before the 2024 general election, there were news crews over in Calais and France interviewing illegal immigrants, and they were saying they were hoping for a Labour government. They watch, they actually understand what's going on in British politics, and when they see things like the nation of sanctuary and that we welcome illegal asylum seekers and small boat people, it's a draw factor. So we will end that. We will publicly state we will end that immediately, and we will also stop illegal immigrants and asylum seekers being housed in Wales in whatever form. And as I say, if we need to change legislation to do that, we will.
Yep.
So we will stand up if necessary to the UK government on this, even though we can't control immigration ourselves. Of course, we understand that. That is not a devolved matter. We will do all we can to frustrate the process.
Yep.
And that is the one big fight we will pick with Westminster if need be, because we don't want to get into the arguing with Westminster in Wales. We want to carry on in Wales, running the Welsh government, using the levers we've already got to improve the lives of Welsh people. But that is one matter in which we will fight the government.
Philip from Farmers Weekly asked about trust, didn't he, earlier? why should farmers trust you? There is no issue greater than illegal immigration where the bond of trust between the governors and the governed is more under stress than this. Every single Prime Minister since David Cameron says, if you come to Britain illegally, you will be deported. Stop the boats, Rishi, Boris, all the rest of it, smash the gangs here, and none of it has amounted to a row of beans. And the public are really angry, and they want action on this. They really do. Okay. Last question, Bethan McKernan from The Guardian.
Is this on? Yes, great.
Yep.
So before today, we didn't actually have that much detail on what reform would be was promising for Wales. But we did have a promise from you, Mr Farage, last summer on your visit to Port Talbot, when you said that you would turn the blast furnaces back on at Tata Steel and you would reopen Wales's coal mines. So I'm wondering, from both of you, why that is missing from today's launch, and then also if you could expand a bit on what working with Westminster to protect strategic national industries means. Is that specific to Port Talbot and to Wales, or is that national? It's not very clear from the policy. Thanks.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting a mass reopening of the pits in the valleys of Wales, although many in the press had a lot of fun at my expense with it. What I did say was there was an anthracite, or a coking coal mine in Cumbria, which was needed to keep the Scunthorpe plant going. So why import the blooming stuff from Australia when we could have produced it in Cumbria, and that principle would apply in Wales or anywhere else? On the blast furnaces, I think there's no doubt that if Richard Tice and I had not been up to Scunthorpe on that Thursday afternoon, that the factory would have been closed, and it led to the first Saturday sitting of Parliament for 43 years. I'm proud of the fact that at least that is still open, but we haven't found a way forward. I think the blast furnace being turned off at Port Talbot was a disaster. You'll be told, oh, it's okay. The ARC recycling plant will be open soon. With our electricity prices, I guarantee you it will never, ever be turned on. So what I said about steel in Wales, the devolved administration just has not got that muscle and power to do it. It is a matter of national policy. What we have said on energy is we'll encourage and work with on nuclear, etc. So, that genuinely is something that the Senate on its own can't do. But I would suggest that it's something we need to have a national conversation about. The world is in the most dangerous place that it's been for over 3/4 of a century. And security of supply of key industrial materials, food, energy sources, all of these things are going to become the politics of the future. And right at the moment, Bethan, the UK is in a pitifully weak place. All right.
And my understanding is the electric arc won't be able to produce the very highest quality steel that's needed for secondary steel. So there is that. But we will appoint a dedicated Minister for Industry to look at our Welsh industry and see what can be invested in to grow. We have to be realistic with this, but I think certainly working with the UK government on shared strategic objectives. We all want energy bills to be lower in this country, and there are areas in Wales where there are already nuclear plants. There's a precedent for it, and we should be looking at that, in my opinion. We're not spending £300 million on expensive green subsidies. We should crack on with enabling and making life easier for those who want to invest. For instance, Rolls-Royce, who want to maybe build modular nuclear reactors. I think that's the kind of thing we should be looking at. We've got limited powers there devolved to us, but we will do what we can in the preparatory to prepare, whether it's planning, that kind of thing, access, infrastructure. We can focus on that. And who knows, perhaps it is a conversation, if need be, if this becomes a success, where we speak to the UK government and say, well, actually give us some more powers on that. But we're not going from day one to start asking for more powers. Let's fulfill our potential first.
Brilliant. Let me round things off. Good. Thank you, all of you. thank all of you for coming this morning, supporting our manifesto launch, some fresh ideas, some big ideas, and a great leader for Reform Wales in Dan Thomas.